was what my doctoral thesis was on, Craig. How can I not talk about monkey balls?
Now we're live, Mike. Joe, just in case you didn't know. Craig Martelle here, coming to you live from the subarctic. It is, what a beautiful day. Hang on just a second. 48 degrees right now, on its way to about 70 or 67, I think, today. But 79 on Sunday, which is insane.
Wow.
We, during the summer, we might only get 4 or 5 days where it's 80 degrees or higher. I mean, we had one year where we had like 40 some days, and that was just utterly insane. We're getting scorched. That was a few years ago. Last year, I think we had maybe 5 days total in the 80s. Otherwise, it's 70s. At night, it's in the 50s. That's our summer. But it's light 24 hours, so we have a great growing season. It's short, but it's 24 hours a day where the plants get all the energy. Today, we have Joe Solari coming to us from
Oak Park, Illinois. I think since we spoke last, I have chosen a new place to shelter in place.
Yeah, you have moved.
Yeah.
You have downsized, kind of, and moved.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't actually. The house is about the same size, but I am a complete with two 15-year-old boys. I need, and being an only child, I need space away from them. I'm learning about living with my family and how much I love them. But yeah, part of, and I think we've talked about it on our other show, is, you know, our family plan is when they go into college is to get out of the state of Illinois and move someplace else. So we had been on a strategy of getting out of our home, and we had it on the market because the market at the time was really good. So right now I'm looking like a genius.
Yeah. Well, because you sold at the absolute epitome right before everything. And I tell you, my mother-in-law did as well. The house she lived in for the last 40 years, my father-in-law passed away about 8 years ago. And actually, 8 years ago. And she lived there, and it was just too big. It was a bunch of property as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take 4 hours with the riding mower to cut the grass. That's how big the property was. And finally, she's like, I can't take care of this anymore. She's 65. And she sold January and bought a new place in January. Now, unfortunately, she bought a new place in January.
Yeah.
She probably would have been able to save 40 or 50,000 on it. But she sold one, paid cash for the new one, and now it's downsized, better area, not out of town. No upkeep because it's in an HOA where they take care of the grass and stuff like that. So that was another well-timed move to make the most of property.
Yeah, and you know, just on that point, like, here's how close it came to me missing this. So we had the house on the market in 2019, and we had one offer, and it was like, So we took it off for the holidays, so we didn't have people trouncing through our house on Christmas and Thanksgiving, and we decided we're going to put a little money into the place because people today really don't have imagination when it comes to selling a house. Like, it has to be certain colors and all that. So it's like, okay, Susie's like, hey, it's January. We have to do this. And I'm like, I don't want to, it's just like procrastinating. And like, she's like, no, like the agent said we have to do it now. So it was like, all right. So we had contractors and all the stuff going on. And if we didn't do that, we would have missed selling in February.
Yeah, because you did some nice upgrades, and they came in and just loved it as it was, and that's the big thing. Yeah. They don't. When you're going to spend that kind of money for a house, you don't want to have to do anything, and that was important. And that's when my mother-in-law was looking for a new house. She's like, "Oh, we can get one for the price we're looking at, and then pocket some of all the extra, some of the equity." But I've got to remodel the kitchen. I've got to do that. Like, bullshit. No, you're not going to do all that. Move into a new house. And, oh, by the way, I've got to fix it all up. Because that's not what she wanted to do. Because 65, again, she didn't want to do that. She didn't need to do that work.
Yeah. And I think there's just more and more people like that it's like, I just want it move-in ready and that's it. Whereas, we're so picky. It's like, we're the ones that go and, like, the house we had, we bought and did a $200,000 rehab on it because it's like we could never find exactly what we want, right? So
yeah.
So I get it, yeah. But
So
we didn't. Well, I'm not here to talk about house sales. What are we here to talk about?
We're here to talk about our favorite topic, cash flow. And this is, especially during this time, it has now been pretty much 2 months since lockdowns, since restricted everything. My wife arrived, it's the 8th. Just a week under 2 months ago, she got back from Europe. She escaped before the full lockdown, one day after EU travel was restricted into the US.
Yeah.
So that
she
took
was
her.
In Spain, right?
She was in Spain, which has one of the highest death rates per million people, and then was able to get on a flight because she's an American. But it took 2.5 days to get home because every airport they stopped, they had to screen them with new screening rules that they weren't smooth in implementing yet. And then she had to change her flight 3 different times. We paid for an upgrade because she's like, oh my God, they do have an upgrade. This is a long haul flight, so I'm going to pay it 1,600 euros to get into first class from coach. And then, oh, by the way, she missed that flight because the screening process. So Buckers, we still haven't gotten that money back, but she did request it. So it's still, she got home. I mean, that's really what matters. And that was almost 2 months ago, and still, geez, it's looking at cash flow once again coming through for us as authors. Those 2 months, we earned our revenue the 2 months prior. So this is why always pushing forward. And the delay, a lot of people are asking, well, hey, with the virus, should I publish now? You should always publish now. If you have a book ready, you should publish. And this is my advice. This is what I do because there's another book behind it. There's another book behind that. Mm-hmm. And as you build your readership up, one thing I found out last year when I published a lot, I published a book a week for the first 30 weeks last year. These were a lot of collaborative efforts. It was killing me. And but a book a week, I had overwhelmed my readers. So the readership that I had brought in, the orgasmic readers, the ones who sign up from the back of your books, I overwhelmed them with too many books. So as I slowed down, I got increased engagement and was making the same money with a book a month, and then was making the same money with a book every 2 months with more strategic promotions. So this is if you wait to publish, then you're going to lose your readership because, hey, you told them I'm going to publish and you didn't, or you're going to stack up books if you keep writing. And now once again, it's like, hey, you might overwhelm your readers. Mm-hmm. Or like advertising. You don't have the money and now you have zero cash flow during that period. If you don't publish now and you don't have a backlist, what are you going to pay for those ads with when you do publish? And then you don't get paid for 60 to 90 days after you publish. So you got to take these things put these into perspective. And for indies, ebooks right now are doing just fine. The ads, Facebook ads are cheap.
I've had this question a couple times with different podcasts I've been on, like, what should I do with this? And I think it, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First off is that if you don't have a marketing plan, then you've got nothing to reference, right? And advertising isn't a marketing plan.
No, it's one element of a marketing plan.
Exactly. And if your marketing plan was to launch a book now, and you've made that brand promise to your customers, then you need to deliver on it. You might have to change your expectations as to how it plays out. So with the clients that I've worked with, several have launched books in this period of time because it was on the plan. And we've had mixed results. Some have done fantastic. Some have done so-so. And these are all published authors that have got a few books out and do well. And, I think that as long as you have the right mindset that it's a different time and you shouldn't have the same kind of expectations, then you'll probably be pleasantly surprised with the results. And to your point, you can always go back and remarket that book later on at a different time, right? Kevin McLaughlin has proven about how you can take a ancient series and bring it back to life.
Yeah, and one thing that he did was his first book, I think, in that series, in the Satori series, was like 30,000 words or 35,000. And he's like, no, let me make it a novel, 40,000. And he bumped it up to like 45, 50,000, made it a full length book for the first book. and then went forward, boxed the whole set and hit it hard and made an annual income's worth in just a month or two with that series boxed into one and hit with the promos, and then adding new series which are doing really well that he's co-authoring with Michael Anderle. And that's the Steel Dragon series. Hit the right market at the right time and the right length. These were 3 books and 180,000 words for each volume that gets published, and it's doing really, really well. The covers are great; they resonate.
Yeah, it is.
I was Mark Dawson posted this morning on his most recent release, which he had 13,000 pre-orders. I think his biggest pre-order was 30,000 that he managed on a book. So even he had reduced, however, 13,000. We're looking at, hey, 13,000. Oh my God. But if you're used to 30,000, 13,000, you could say, well, that it didn't meet expectations, but it probably did, because I can guarantee Mark was on top of that the entire time to track that, and he had run no ads either. So his previous book with the 30,000, I believe, was a lot of ads and building that up. So just testing how it worked. So the tempering expectations is probably the absolute best thing you can do. And I tell people under promise and over deliver. So, but if you promised, hey, I'm going to publish a book in May, and here's the book, you give some hype, you do the cover reveal, and then all of a sudden you're like, the market might not be optimal, so let me kick it down. Well, you're just chasing away all the readers. Even if you don't have very many, you're alienating them right at the start. You don't want to alienate any of your readers. Under promise, over deliver, and then move forward. I had a book hit 51 overall in the U.S. store. That was 4 years old. That was my End Times Alaska, because it's a survivalist, so it's a right book at the right time. We had set this up 3 months ago, and this is my traditionally published series.
Did you list it under nonfiction now?
I should have.
Two books.
But that was a book. That was my very first book I ever wrote, and I wrote it. It published. I published it. I did for crap because I didn't know what I was doing. But a traditional publisher, an imprint of Simon & Schuster, bought it from me, even though I had already published it, because they were trying to get into this market. And we did that. They re-edited it, changed the covers, changed the titles, and then we added 3 books and made it a 4-book series. It got into Barnes & Noble. It's a really popular book here in Barnes & Noble in Alaska. But we put the first book on sale, and I worked the publisher. I said, hey, I'll do all the advertising, just to make that first book free in the 4-book series. They each have audio that go with them. And he's like, hey, no problem. We'll do that. Like, second book, 99 cents. Third and fourth book will be full price. And it went free. It rocketed. It stayed high even after it came off free, and really high, and kept high. And it's still doing well. Book 2 is still doing well. Books 3 and 4 are getting the read through. So huge win with a book that was 4 years old, and the highest it's ever been. And this was 4 years after public, and my first book. So it's not my best work, if you ask me, as judging by the freaking 1-star reviews that I got. People get a book for free. They launched the 1-star, and one guy started his review with, "I'm a writer and this is crap." I was like, "Yeah, fuck you, buddy." Thank you for that. This book has sold an awful lot of copies, and the follow-on book. So the story is resonating. Absolutely, I could write it better, but it's not a bad story.
Well, the other thing about right now that some stuff that I've observed and that I've talked to some people about is thinking about how you're going to, and I know we're going to talk about cash flow eventually, but staying on the marketing bend a little bit. So one of the things I was inspired by, Martha Carr has been running around for at least a year. When she goes anywhere, she hooks up with the readers and sponsors a lunch.
Yeah. Yep.
And she's had people come all over the place. Now we have this thing where people can't go and meet, right? So I know that she has started doing this where she's sponsoring lunch, like virtual lunches where people can win pizzas. And it's something I talked to some clients about where with her. And then I know Dakota Crouch just did it with his last book launch where he ran a contest and gave people pizzas for their family. Because you think there's people that maybe are fans that they don't know where their next meal's coming from.
Yeah, yeah. And he ordered the pizzas and had them delivered to their house.
Yep. And then he was on Twitch playing video games for his launch because he writes lit RPG, right? So it was like there's a whole different kind of marketing. And when you think about that, these are people that have the capacity to spend a lot of money on advertising. And I would argue that that money spent directly on fans is 10 times more effective.
It keeps your organic readers on board, and Martha's doing this with the luncheons. She's doing it with just the constant engagement. She's been doing live readings, and I see a number of other authors. Ira Heineken is doing live readings. He read his whole book over the course of I think a month. I see Andy Serkis for Hobbitathon is reading the entire Hobbit. The Hobbit. Andy Serkis, he was Gollum.
Yeah. So you doing all the voices?
He's reading the entire Hobbit online, and he's doing that as part of a charity. So this is what don't alienate your fans. Getting back to the baseline of keep your fans, embrace them, hold them close. Right before I was a little late starting because I got an email and I'm like, I better answer this because he's like, I don't know if you'll see this or answer it. It'll probably get kicked back, but I just want to tell you, I love this series. I love all your series. I've read this one's my favorite. I'm like, let me answer that right now and tell him, hey, thank you for the kind words. It really helps me. I appreciate that. And we jumped on. But the promotion, like the one for my old series, yes, I only get a portion of that because it's trad pubbed, but it's also the visibility. If I make the trad pub money, one thing they've done is they've shared my indie books to their list. They have a magic list. It bumped my whole series to bestseller status when they hit the list with that series. So keeping them happy. And I set this up 3 months ago. So from a cash flow perspective, because this promotion ran in April, second quarter, I get paid 6 months after that. So it accrues. The second quarter is when they get it. The actual money for that quarter goes into the third quarter, and they pay the quarter after that. So I'll get that money by Christmas. So that'll be a Christmas bonus. And that's when you're in trad, that's the cash flow. Now I'm getting money from last year when we ran a promo on one of the audios. So cash flow, this is one. So now I've hedged my bet into Christmas time with this. And oh, by the way, I've got another 3 promotions running this month. I've got 2 books releasing in June and promotions, and already setting up promos in July. I've got that outlay for those promotions, but I don't have the ad spend. I just contacted my folks to let them know that we're gonna pretty much triple my ad spend. I could be spending up to about $9,000 this month on ads. Pending. That's pending. I'm not going to spend $9,000 because I'm only making not much more than that. With the previous spend last month wasn't that much. It was like $4,500 between Facebook and Amazon. Going to kick it up to about $9,000 on Facebook and Amazon, and then other promotions will be on top of that. But that's to drive that revenue because Facebook ads are cheap right now and increase the impressions because I've got so many books, and this is the power of backlist, that if they start reading those and then those page reads and those follow-on buys, if they like the series, kick to the next month. And now 2 months down the road, I'm looking at that cash flow. This has to be a constant rolling thing. Too many people look at, hey, I'm launching a book, and they put 100% of their effort in this book launch. The book launches, it does great. It starts tapering off, and they don't have the plan already in place to follow that tail and fill in. It has to be every month. Even if you only have one book, what's the plan to get that book re-energized at like the beginning or the middle of each month, so you get enough cash accrued during the month, enough sales that then 2 months down the road you get a paycheck. So this is the cash flow look. How much can I spend now and weather until, 2 months down the road when I get paid.
Yeah, I think there's two things there that you made me think about. And, again, a lot of people have been like, should I be advertising? Should I not? And if you don't have a strategy around what you're trying to do with your ads, it's hard to kind of figure out what's going on right now. And so for some folks, I said, before you do anything, maybe back off and figure out what your baseline is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And and so there's some authors that are kind of in a precarious situation with cash flow because they're spending in an order of about 30% of their gross profit on ads. Mm-hmm. And what we need to know in that case is, do you need to continue to spend that if you're seeing your sales drop? Yeah. Or not? Because if you cut off your ad spend today, this gets to the cash flow piece, that's money you don't spend today. The impact of that stopping of your advertising doesn't happen for 60 days, right? So you're going to see the results and you're going to know, okay, I need to accommodate that I'm going to have a lower cash flow in 2 months' time. And what some folks are finding out when they do this is that they actually end up with more cash at the end of the day in the short term because they don't spend the ads. And in the long term, when that money's coming, because they now see that maybe the ads aren't doing what they thought they were doing. They just got in the habit of spending that money and had built this baseline ad spend into their business. And it was really kind of money for nothing. So I think that if you don't understand that about your business, and because right now cash has to be king, if if you're like, oh, Solari, I don't know about that, maybe try and kick off just $1,000, right? If you're doing $4,000 a month and you take 25% of that off, did you see a 25% drop in sales? Probably not. Yeah. So I think that's something to think about. And the other part of it is and I'm actually doing right now a lot of research on this whole idea of the impact of cumulative advantage for authors and how powerful it is. And that cycle of those rounds that you play with each launch of your book, I'm believing that has far more to do with how you build rank and audience than anything else. That successive play at the game and the fact that because again, the power of Amazon is in its marketing, and that's all associated with new book launches.
Yeah, that's it. They make a new release list. I mean, they really give extra love to new launches and old books that are doing really well. So acting like a new launch. So everything has to act like a new launch with a lot of hype, a lot of energy from the buyers, from the community. And then they'll say, yes, we want to make our money too. So let's push this. They're not going to, they like Amazon, right? They're making billions. They're $1 trillion company. They're still low risk. They're as low risk as they can make it. And if they take an unknown author with one book and start investing any money in that, because it's not one author, it's 1 million authors who have relatively low sales, and they start pushing any money into that, they're going to spend more than they're making with their 30% cut if you're in KDP Select. And even if you're not, you can still, if you $2.99, you can make it 70%. You just get the download fee. But they're taking their cut, and they would rather do that if they're going to invest any additional capital. They're going to do it on a book that they're pretty sure they're going to get thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars back on. So this is why you see the same books popping up over and over. Where the Crawdads saying is it popped up on my affiliate page today and has been for the last year. And so along with the other, it's like, hey, if you want what a top 5 list is of Amazon books, all you have to do is you go to your affiliate page and it tells you, hey, here's books you should buy. We notice you haven't bought these yet. No, I'm not going to buy them either.
Well, and
So
one of the things that Amazon is limited in as far as resources is space, in the sense of how much space they can dedicate in emails that they send out. So they're, they can only send out so many of those a day before people start unsubscribing. They only have so much space within that email. So they want to make sure that they maximize the impact of every time one of those emails goes out. I mean, they're measuring the revenues per dollar when they send out a, hey, you should read this or you should buy that, right? That's been the powerhouse of their brand for a decade. So, they're going to select certain books that they know are going to perform better, right? And if they try, they're always willing to give you a try, right?
Yeah.
But if they find out we've given you a couple tries and sorry, you're not selling any books for us, then you're not going to get those slots. And I know from observing Susie's books, where most of the marketing that's done with that, because it's kind of a weird niche, is really Amazon marketing. And I can see it in our numbers when they push that thing out, because it's almost like a new launch.
Yeah.
She's got books that are coming on 7 years old.
And she was on Good Morning America or something as well with the fashion piece. And all that push is good stuff. But that's her brand. It's a separate brand, and you can watch it, and it's niche, and she's good at it. Yeah. But for marketing and advertising, when you're advertising, and Joe talked about baseline. First, I'm not going to kick the price up to $9,000 a month. I'm not going to make that $9,000 back. And we'll talk about what that money looks like in just a minute. I want to talk about with the baseline. If you're running ads and you're not getting sales, you're marketing to the wrong genre, the wrong readers. Your cover isn't getting them to look at the blurb. Your blurb isn't converting, or there's a problem with your book because the look inside feature. Now, getting the people to click on the cover takes ad copy. So if you're running ads with copy and not just doing the ads with no copy, if you're doing ads with that copy, may not be converting. It may be, hey, there's this great stuff going on in the universe. Check it out. I mean, so what? It has to be gripping. We had Brian Meeks on the show last week to talk about setting that hook and then starting to reel them in and what that looks like. So those are the things. So if your book isn't converting, you got to look, are you targeting the right readers? And that means you got to find who they are and what they are. And then you got to have the cover that gets those specific readers to then look further. And once they do, is your ad copy, is your and I say ad copy, that's your product description. If you're doing nonfiction, you want a description. Here is what you're getting with this. Here's what you're going to learn. Here's the expertise of the author. When you're talking fiction, you're making shit up. So you're telling them, hey, this is put your checkbook away. There's more. And you want them to just buy because, hey, 3 days left. Otherwise, you'll never see this price again. You want to get them to buy it. Mm-hmm. And then once they buy it, if they're not buying second, third, fourth books, there's a problem with your book. And a lot of authors refuse to accept that. That's where I go first. I look at my read through and say, hey, what's wrong with my book? So it's not imposter syndrome. It's just me putting my business hat on saying my product's green when it should be blue. and marketing to the wrong readership. Monster Case Files is a great example. I incorrect covers. I marketed to the wrong readership and I got no sales. Hey, surprise. I rewrote the whole thing and it's looking pretty good. It launches in 3 days. All right. Just targeting straight mystery readers. We've got our targeting plan set up for the advertising when that kicks off on Monday. And that's, hey, get those mystery readers. And the something completely different than the previous campaigns. And we'll see how it goes. And also, those were novellas. Combined them all into one book, 250,000 words in a single volume. And we're putting it out at $2.99 because guess what? I already didn't make a lot of money and took the losses on last year's taxes. So let's see how this year, we're just going to sell volume. We're not going to go below $2.99 and we're going to keep it there. It's a little low for a 250,000 word book, but this is the new campaign and we'll see if we can get it to resonate. But the cash flow, if you spend $1,000 a month throughout the year on advertising, you're doing the math here in your heads, you are not spending $12,000. Okay, get your head around that. What you're spending is $3,000. You're investing $3,000. because you spend it January, February, March. At the end of March, you're getting January's money back. So going into April, you're just reinvesting, and all you need is that $3,000 nest egg to then move forward throughout the year. You don't need 12 grand to start your process if you're getting at least a 1-to-1 ROI. So this is why it's very important. And this all of that was to get back to Joe's point on baseline. You need to be able to, so you got to look back at the stuff that's free, which is your blurb, your ad copy, cheap, which is a new cover, relatively cheap. I know some people spend, it's a lot of money for some folks, but if you're looking at making enough money to make a mortgage payment, the potential is make more than what your cover is going to cost. And you have to grip the reader. So you can get cheaper covers. Blurb is free. Ad copy is free. Study, learn, watch, listen, and tweak that until you get it to convert. And then your story, that's all on you. You've got to make sure the story is good. You can work with your readers and make it better and do better and better as you write. I got a great compliment yesterday that an author who said, "Hey, I've watched a lot of prolific authors, and a lot of them taper off. Their books kind of get stale. They get boring. Their writing gets stale." And she said, "But your writing gets better and better with each book. But that's intentional. I'm really trying to make my word flow better, eliminate duplicate, just do the stuff where it's a more engaging read." And I was really pleased to see that compliment that appreciates my efforts, because the first book and the 1-star reviews, and now the latest book, and I'm up to like 28 reviews on it, all 5-star, and they're sincere 5-star. They're not like, "Hey, this is crap, but I still like the series." No, they like the book.
Well, I think what's hard for authors that may be just beginning is that they hear so much about all these more advanced marketing strategies that require money, and there's some things that get forgotten along the way, and you've hit on a couple of them. First off, the tough love is, if your story's shitty, it's shitty.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll say this, that and I'm working with authors that are doing, mid 6 figures. I've got a couple that are doing over $1 million a year. None of those people did that on their first book, right? It took them many books to find their voice and to find their audience. Now, some were fortunate. They've been doing this for a while, so they kind of were able to do that while they're riding up the wave, where things were a bit easier with marketing and things. But the point is that a lot of people just aren't prepared to have the patience to find their voice, right? And you kind of alluded to it here, and that like you're always working to get your book better. Investing that money in a good cover. When you think about it, I just find it bizarre that people are prepared to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on advertising with Amazon, but they're not prepared to spend that kind of money on a cover, when a cover is so integral. And there's so much data proving that a cover will get people to take that next step, right? And the one last piece is and this gets back to that cumulative advantage and audience building thing that I want people to think about, is the more time that you spend getting your audience right earlier. And I think that you can do that in the author community with newsletter swaps and some of the stuff that is lower cost, using things like BookFunnel and Art of the Arcane and Story Origin, those kind of platforms. If you get the right audience, even if it's small, let's look at where Facebook is going. They have millions and millions of data points. And if you can tell them, hey, this is what my audience, my best customers look like, they can go find more like that for you. A lot easier than you ever will. If you don't have that data to tell them, then they're just going to go find anybody and spend your ad money. But if you say, no, I'd rather spend a little bit more and get a lot more people like this, then your ads are going to be so much more effective.
Conversion. Yeah. And this is Brian Cohen talks about this, that the single greatest data analysis point is your conversion rate. If you're converting your books from an ad or a marketing campaign or a promotion campaign to a sale, you win. The better the conversion rate, the better you're going to spend your money. The more you're going to make off your dollar per dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's the other thing. It's funny what I'm discovering is in the beginning, it's really about your audience, right? And then when you get up to a certain level, again, it's really about your audience because ad spend isn't infinite. When you get up to the levels, I have clients that are trying to move from number 7 in the store to number 6. You can't spend the kind of money to get there. Like you have to build the audience over time because you're talking about a difference of 500 books a day need to be sold, right? And these are folks that are, they're writing, 5-figure monthly checks for ad spend, right?
Yeah.
And that's the other part of this thing too, is as an early author, let's say you have $500 you're going to spend on ads. That's a huge amount of your working capital at this point.
Yeah.
And it's spit in the wind compared to what's getting thrown at advertising on Amazon.
It is. And that's because I just told you I'm going to spend $6,000, but $6,000 across 8 different titles. So it's not a lot. There's 2 titles I'm throwing some money at, and the other ones I'm throwing incremental just to see what resonates. We'll do some A/B testing, and then we're going to, once we have the opportunity presents itself, we're going to exploit that, increase spend, increase ad engagement, and keep building the winners, build them up, just like Amazon. I'm going to do that with my own because I do have enough first in series. I have plenty of options.
Well, and I know enough about your numbers and other folks' numbers that the kind of money that you're spending on ads compared to other people is relatively low.
It is. It is.
And that's the other part people have to understand is if you have a marketing strategy, if you really are thinking about how you're trying to find your audience, you take an approach like Chris Kennedy Publishing, right? Now here's an interesting thing. So for those that don't know about the 4 Horsemen universe, they don't do any advertising. It's all based on their fans and the stuff that they do at cons. They go to a lot of cons, and the writers are at these things signing books, and they all are into cosplay. And from that, now this has gone over time, right? Yeah. They have full-blown fan clubs that are incorporated that are running their mercenary groups. And these guys, like, this is serious stuff. Like, they've got rule books and you play in that world too. So you know how, when people get dedicated to it, how serious they are. And what's interesting to me is that without them being able to go to cons right now, and they had to cancel a lot of those shows, is they're still selling books because those people have a community that they've built, and the community's just adjusted. So,
and they engage with that community now, just it's online, because that community can't go out either. They want to go cosplay together, dress up as the mercenaries within the 4 Horsemen universe. And so constant engagement, and this is reader engagement, is so critical because you want that core base of fans, because then when you release, it's like, I know I'm going to sell X number of copies because here's my core fans.
So did we talk about cash flow a little bit?
We did. Especially when it comes to spending on marketing. Let's talk about other streams of cash flow and how they can help your macro picture. Okay.
I think that first, I have had this question a couple of times, is now a good time for me to look at alternate revenue streams with everything that's going on? And I think that, again, it goes back to what's your 2 things. What's your strategy? Like, is that an important part of how you were growing your business, and it needs to happen no matter what? And then do you have the money to do it? Right? Because if it's the kind of thing where it's like you're trying to do this on the come and you figure, like, if I do this, then I'm going to get the money, you have to be careful. But if you had that investment set aside to do whatever it is, you're actually probably going to get more benefit out of it, because if you notice, there's two types of businesses whenever there's an economic downturn. There's the ones that go into most businesses will go into protection mode. They get very defensive, and it's like, I'm going to hold on to my cash. I'm going to make sure that I get through this. But businesses that are prepared for downturns get really aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's some of their biggest growth periods, because they have the cash in play and they know what their business is. And they basically say, okay, well, now is when I'm going to go out and be aggressive about this and create these new revenue streams.
Because they launch into the void from those who went defensive and said, I'm going to shepherd my cash and hunker down. And so they launch and it's opportunity.
Yeah. And this is in all businesses, right? It's like, if your competition cuts their salesmen's travel expenses by 30% and they're going out and seeing their customers less, and you're out in front of their customers, like, you don't have to be all that good of a salesman. Like, you're there and the guy's got a problem and it's like, okay, you're here, you can fix it. The other guy I forgot about. So I think that that's part of this thing is, if you had a strategy to invest in something like audiobooks, this is a good time to do it. I think that, more and more people are getting comfortable with what can be done with sources like Kickstarter, especially if you're trying to, this gets back to my whole idea of, like, this isn't just about writing books. This is a golden age of content creation that all of us that were daydreaming in class about whatever we were daydreaming about and not paying attention to, we can take those daydreams and turn them into content that people will love, whether it's a book, an audiobook, a game. And the cost to do that has gotten so low that if you have that dream, it just requires you to do the work and the planning to execute on it, and I would say also that depending on some of those areas where you might be thinking about going into, there may be more capacity, right? So let's say, for example, Craig, you were thinking about doing an online game. You wanted to create a game for iPhones around, one of your books. There's a lot of programmers that are twiddling their thumbs right now. Maybe it's time you go after something like that.
But the on Kickstarter and Patreon, because I started a Patreon account, but I'd been diddling around with it. I got distracted. Little heart surgery really set me back. And the Patreon, especially nowadays, I saw somebody launch a Kickstarter, and this is the only way he makes his money is Kickstarter through miniature figurines. And he got lambasted. Somebody's like, I just lost my job, and you're asking me to invest $50 in miniatures. And he got lambasted in the comments. He's like, but this is my job. This is my job. Mm-hmm. So I didn't take your job away from you, but please don't take mine away from me. Mm-hmm. And so it was a running battle, and I don't think that Kickstarter funded. And it made it very, very difficult. So just be aware. And like Patreon, I'm not going to start one right now because I don't want to come across as, hey, money grubbing, because I'm doing okay. And so I'm not going to do any additional takes from my readers besides saying, here's a good book. When KU was free for 2 months, I posted the link. I shared it in like 5 different newsletters saying, if you don't have KU, get it. If you have the time, here you can, even 2 months, if you only read one book over 2 months, it was free. Just cancel at the end and you're good. And so I pushed that hard. My page views went up a little bit, but not what I thought they would. But still, here's an opportunity. Here's an author trying to help you, as opposed to, oh, hey, join my Patreon and you get custom content. I will do that eventually, but it's not right now. Other revenue streams, affiliate. I had my biggest affiliate day ever a few days ago. I had 20.
You gotta be careful there. Amazon just cut their affiliate.
Well, not for the products that I was fine. Because they only cut it for certain products.
Yeah, I know in the affiliate community, folks that were making a lot of money off that, they are livid, and like there's folks that have had their income cut in half. So
yeah, I believe that, but they're making affiliate off household products and stuff like that, and it's like necessities. It's like when governments tax food. I mean, that's Jesus. You got to be kidding me. And the the affiliate, I had 2,300 clicks in a day on my my affiliate links. You know, I'm getting a new website designed and all this stuff. Everything just clicked on a day, and life was pretty good. But the affiliates,
I saw it says, please keep talking about cash flow. You mentioned that you can't buy your way into an audience alone, but then we veered away from it.
Yeah. I'll touch that one real quick because I'm talking a lot today. I had my 2.5 cups of high test this morning as opposed to my 1 because I ran out of decaf instant. But we're not gonna talk about that part. You can't buy your way into an audience. This is not alone. You can expand your audience, but you really need that core. And we mentioned this already at least 3 times today, that you have to develop that core readership. Chris Kennedy has done an exceptional job, but it's taken years still building that core. And this is your baseline. This is also your initial sales rank. This is your initial love from Amazon because your readers want to pick up your book. And then you can expand on that, especially you can run a poll, run a survey, use SurveyMonkey, ask a few questions and find, how do I find more readers just like you, which is what your survey is about. But then you ask more detailed questions and then you go find more readers just like these who like your books. You might be surprised. You might have, 60% of your readership might be guys from 40 to 45. I mean, you don't know that for sure. And if you ask and run a survey and it's well received and it's well answered, you get some good data, then you just target more like that. It's simple. Oh, I would have never thought. Who cares? Here's the data. Let's go get after more of these. So that's what it means. Expand your readership, but buying your first readership, you've got a book, you haven't sold any copies, and you're going into ads. You have no idea on your genre. You're guessing because it's like, hey, I like this book, so I'm going to try to find more people like me. You need to find more people like the strangers who like your book. So you need to find strangers and then expand from there.
Well, you're wearing a Rush 2112 t-shirt, hoodie, excuse me.
Yeah.
There's a perfect example of somebody that understands about sticking to their knitting. You and I are of the age where, as far as when Rush, like I had 2112 on 8-track. Okay. So, but my point on this is that every time they put out an album, including that one, the critics panned it.
Yeah.
And when you went to a Rush show, it was always in a huge stadium packed with Rush fans.
And laser shows, and it was awesome.
And they were all about their fans, right?
Yep.
Like they didn't really pay any attention to the criticism. And what did they do? They toured. Like, that's the band I've seen the most, mainly because they were always around. Like they were always in Chicago. You could always see them. They just seemed to, they were hardworking dudes. My point of that is that we get too focused maybe on all the whiz bang technology that's available to us and forget about the audience, and that there's a really powerful tool in what authors have with things like newsletter swaps and using these book funnel deals and these other guys like Art of the Arcane. If you're just beginning to build your newsletter and you don't have a good community built around that, then you haven't really explored the cheapest, best sourced fans possible. Because if you're selling urban fantasy and you're able to get into Martha Carr's urban fantasy list or somebody else, like those are fans that read urban fantasy. They're pinpoint. These are people that want to pick up a book, and nurturing that community a little bit more and understanding why they're reading your books. It's not that sexy and it takes longer to scale up, but it's the right type of fans. And what I've seen, authors that are really doing well, they don't have huge lists. They just have really well-built lists.
Yeah.
Or really well-built Facebook groups. It depends what they're into, right? That part is a personal thing, right? It's like some people really like to use their newsletter. Some people would rather just, have a Facebook group and post memes and kind of read their books and do. I don't think that is, one is better than the other. It's just understanding what underlies that is that if you're doing those kind of things and you already have you don't have to spend a lot of extra money to do that. Right.
Yeah. It's an investment in time.
Yeah.
But the hey, first a show on cash flow that we actually talk less about cash flow than we do on other shows. But cash flow, one of the basic premises that you need to understand is you invest in your business, but you still really need to make more than you spend. So I saw Elaine Bateman post a comment on bootstrapping. We have 2 different presentations. We got one from Barry Hutchison from 20 Books London, and we have one from Kevin Tomlinson from D2D last year from last year's 20 Books Vegas. And Kevin did his, even though, yes, he's drafted digital, he wrote his on bootstrapping his book. How do you get as much visibility at the least cost possible? And until you kind of know what you're doing, you can dabble with ads, but don't jump in. You publish your first book and you're like, hey, I've got lots of money. I'm going to spend all of it on ads and I'm going to be great. I would caution against that. And once again, cash, you need to shepherd your cash, especially through the first book, until you get that second book and third book. And now you can start focusing where to spend your money as opposed to just shotgunning it out. Because an author with 1 book will not sell as well as an author with 3 books. I will make this blanket statement, and that's probably because it's one out of a million will sell that first book. It'll go crazy and viral, and everybody will buy it. But generally, if a reader goes over and you only have 1 book, it takes a lot of effort to get that 1 book into their hands where they're willing to give it a try because they don't want to be disappointed that the author never writes another book.
Especially if your premise is it's going to be one of a series.
Yes, that's right. Number 1 of. You better be able to, because I've seen a lot of first in series, so there was never a number 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other one that I've seen happening a lot in certain genres is they've got a squillion pre-orders. They've got they're doing all that. They went and bought book covers. They've got pre-orders. They've got a lot of great book ideas, but they're not delivering. And the audience out there sees that, and they're not going to put up with that long, right? Because they're not there for any other reason to be entertained by reading a book, right? Yeah. This whole premise, we want to talk about the basics of cash flow in this industry. It boils down to the reader-writer relationship. If you can't get a reader to pay for your book, Amazon doesn't make any money. BookFunnel doesn't make any money. Nobody goes to Craig's conference. Nothing happens, right? And now the great thing about today is that if you want to write a book, you just have a book you have to get out and you're not in it to make money. You can do that for free.
Yeah, completely for free.
There's no barriers to entry to this marketplace.
Yep.
Now you put the caveat in there that you want to make money from this book. Oh, well, that's different.
Yeah.
It's very different because now you're asking somebody to part with one of their most precious resources. And you're going to think money. No, it's time. Right? To get somebody, this is something that gets lost a lot of times is like, there's some real basic stuff in kind of keep going to marketing is like, it's not just getting somebody to download your book, getting them to read it.
Yeah.
Right.
6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours of their time.
Yeah.
And you're asking them to invest that in you. That is truly a more finite resource than cash. Now, you can get it. Now, the number of books they can read is infinite. What can they do with this finite resource of time, and why would they invest it in you? And this is one thing that you need to engage. So it really comes down to engagement because, too many times 20 Books has been accused of we just write shit, get it out there, sell it, and make fortunes. You don't make a fortune off crap. So it absolutely must be the best book you can write. and it absolutely must be better than the last book for a continuing fortune. If because it's you can spend as much as you want on advertising, but if they start reading and put it down, they're not coming back. If they don't pick it up in the first place, they'll never come over. And it takes such a monumental effort. The reader-writer relationship, I think Joe just hit it on the head, that that is the absolute epitome of any campaign. And it starts when you put pen to page and craft that first sentence, rewrite it, that first page, that first chapter, that this is all reader-writer relationship. It's not like, I'm going to write this even if they don't like it. Okay, then adjust your expectations that you may not make any money. And that's okay. You have to understand your why. And if your why of writing is, I want to tell a story in a great way where the readers are wowed, learn something, and then come back for the next book because I really want to write another book. You can do all of that too. So it's not a binary, you can do one or the other. You have to, it's a job if you write to make money, or if it's for the art, I don't care about the money. It doesn't have to be one or other. It can be shades. I'm going to write for the art. I'm only going to write a book a year because I'm going to rewrite it a dozen times. Perfectly fine. Just temper your expectations and what your time commitment is if you do want to make money.
Yeah, I think that it like you say, sometimes it gets so absolute. It's like, oh, it has to be for the art or it has to be for the money, and it's not. The fact that you can do both and is probably the easiest it's ever been. The problem that a lot of folks have today, though, is when they look and they're comparing themselves to others and they're saying, well, this guy's making money writing books about cats in space. I hate cats, right? Like how is it? It's like, well, you know what? That now your comparison's a joy killer, right? And you go find whatever is your thing that makes that hits on that apex of the reader-writer relationship. Because one thing that I have been amazed by with my limited exposure in this marketplace is,
we're not going to look at you anymore, Joe, because you said you hate cats.
I didn't say I hated cats. I didn't say I hated cats. I said I hated writers that write about cats.
Oh, Jesus. You're
killing me, man. Gives you a lot of comments now, right? They're bad comments, but
Judith bagging on me, talking too much. Shit. Joe's the favorite one.
Look at that. But one more thing about, we'll kind of put that aside. Back on the cash flow thing. One thing that we were talking about before that I wanted to bring up is, if you don't understand the cash flow that's necessary for getting an author business started, I have a free tool. So if you go to joesolari.com, author planner, it's absolutely free. You go in and you put in your words per day, the size of your books, your cost, and then it'll give you information on what it's going to cost for you to get to break even and profitable. It's super simple. And if you haven't done that, then you're really, this is going to sound super mean, but you're really not that serious about making this a business. I mean, if you can't even go and fill out my one little spreadsheet to know whether you even got the money to get to the finish line, right? Because let's get to real brass tacks on cash flow. Most guys fail because they never had the money to get started in the beginning. They never had the working capital that's required to get a business going. And if you start to think about what your writing pace is, there's kind of a couple camps people fall in. And I've talked about this at 20 books, right? You may be a fast writer and you think that you can put out 10 books a year and you could physically write them, but you don't have the capital to put out 10 books a year because you can't make the covers. You can't get the editing done. You can't do the actual working capital to get those books to market. So you've set yourself up for failure before you even started because you have this expectation of 10 books where the reality is your cash is telling you it's 5.
Yeah.
But if you know that, then it's like, okay, 5 is the pace I'm set on, right? The other side of it is that some people just really underestimate what it costs to get books to market. Like if you're in a genre that I mean, if you're going to be legit, you need to spend just kind of, $800 for a book cover, right? And some people are like, oh my God, I can't. But like, there's certain genres, like if you don't spend that kind of money on a cover, it just isn't going to get the eyeballs on it, because there's $2,000 covers out there.
Yeah. Or find a cover that's comparable. And now you're talking time. And also having a cover artist's name. I bought a lot of Tom Edwards covers. They've been expensive. I probably have 20 some, and they've been expensive, but I can say I have Tom Edwards covers on my books, and everybody knows it. And that is perfect for that genre.
And I would argue that, let's say he's double what you would spend on somebody else. Mm-hmm. That money will be returned to you tenfold in advertising.
On all my books with Tom Edwards covers, I have way more than made my money back, because the people look, because the covers are so engaging in those genres. They're like the best covers out of the grouping of books, except for the other Tom Edwards covers in those genres. But that's part of it. I've got a question on the screen: cash flow sources, audiobook, affiliate, Amazon, print and ebook, Ingram Spark, or if you're wide, it's going to be Kobo, BNN, Apple. Merchandise. The question on merchandise is, if you use any graphics, do you have the right licenses for merchandise? Just make sure of that. Yeah. There may be an additional cost. Books on 8-track. I love books on 8-track. 2112, one of my first albums that I bought on 8-track for my 72 Mustang, and I had to get the upgraded 8-track player because it didn't come with it came with an AM radio. It had the 302. It didn't have the 351 Cleveland, so it was one of the cheaper 72 Mustangs. Cheap and relative. I love that car. Yeah. The other sources of income for me are anthologies that I submit short stories to, where I either get paid a rate or paid a royalty, or some. Geez, I'm drawing a blank, but I don't have Patreon or Kickstarter, so I don't have those as supplemental sources. I have my Trad Pub that I get quarterly as an additional.
Mm-hmm. One thing to think about with like going into some of these other things. So, I'm just locked up here. I'm back. So with going into some of these alternative sources, some things that I've discovered with working with some clients is, one, for us that were doing things with merchandising, we got real jammed up in this whole thing because we're sourcing stuff from China. So, right. And then kind of layered into that is that when you do this, when you're really working through this, and I had this experience with one of my clients, is that when we got done doing the analysis and she paid me to do all this analysis, it's like, why do you want to go into this merchandising thing? You don't make nearly this kind of money. No. Let's focus on books, because you do so well at that. I mean, just because other people are doing this stuff over here doesn't mean you have to. Yeah. And the result of that was, well, we want to do something like that, but it's not to make money. We're going to do these boxes and stuff for fans. So now, even though it's now just a cost, it's in a different view for us, because we're saying this money spent direct into the fan base is so much more better used than giving it to Facebook or Amazon. Then it makes sense. And now it's not this burden where we're like, we got to go get all. It's like, okay, now it's got a different time kind of framing of how we're doing this. It's not about us trying to build a website with a bunch of merchandise on it. Each one of those is a specific case for a different author. And I caution people when they're watching other authors that are successful and they're getting into all these other things, is stop and ask yourself, do you even really want to do that? Right? Like,
yeah.
Because when you're in a point where you got that kind of audience, like, you make a lot of money on a book. So just something to keep in mind.
And time and investment. And that's I use my merchandise for 20 Books Vegas. So my royalties, I got the first check this month, in 3 months, I must have sold something. So $6.40. And that's, I mean, this is 20 Books Vegas graphics that the conference buys. So it's not a revenue source. I didn't pay for the imagery and the stuff we put on the merchandise directly, but still it's going to be really tough to make reasonable money, and you can make more with a book. Mm-hmm. So we have one last question that we'll ask before we move on. Most businesses fail because they lack functionality. That's on your site. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, and this goes, boy, this was like a right on a T-ball for us on this one. Thanks, Elaine. So the function of any business, doesn't matter what your business is to generate free cash flow. Okay. That is the function of every single, even if you're a nonprofit, if you're begging for money for people, the purpose is to get more money than you spend, to have additional cash. So in our business, we're going to sell books and we're going to make money from that. Okay. So we have to get that business functioning as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Right. So because then
have a huge well of money from which to draw to get it to that point where you're positive. Yeah. Because
the other part of this kind of thing that I talk about is why business. So that's functionality. The other part is what success is. And success is defined by the investors, right? What that cash flow is going to be used for. And guess what? You're the investor, right? So once it starts having free cash flow, then you get to decide what to do with that. But prior to that, as the investor, you're the source of investment. So we want to get you out of reaching into your pocket to make the business work. So, that's really where if you boil it down to those essences, like how do we get this business functional as fast as possible, right? So understanding how much cash we need to get us to break even, right? What wipes out most businesses, they run out of money. Doesn't matter what industry. If they don't have the cash, they run out of money. And because most of us are funding this stuff ourselves, bootstrapping it, that doesn't mean ignoring the numbers and just we'll figure it out as we go. It's like a good bootstrap strategy is, like, listen, I've got $1,000 I can put into this. And that $1,000 has to get me to here.
Yeah.
Right. And I think especially right now, there's probably people listening to this that have just lost their jobs. Yeah. They've been writing a little bit and they're wondering if now is the time to go full time. Maybe it is, but if you do it without a plan, if you don't really boil this thing down and say, listen, I need this much money a month to keep the lights on in my house, keep everybody fed. I know that I've got this much runway, that I've got basically 6 months of cash because of unemployment or whatever. You have to plan that out.
Yeah.
If you do that, it's going to do a couple things. One, it'll get your mind so that you understand, like, hey, I've got a plan. If I just stick to it, it's going to work. And you're going to have something, if there is some upsets and changes, you could see what those changes are and react to them. If you have nothing, then you're always just kind of drifting off different ways or shooting different ways, trying to get to what you think is going to save the day, opposed to the businesses that I've seen have been successful, doesn't matter what industry, right, are the ones that have a plan and understand that plan. And when it changes, like you and I were in the oil and gas industry. That is an industry that the guys that are massively successful understand those cycles. Yeah. And they're prepared for boom and they're prepared for bust.
Yeah.
So I think that right now, if you are like, what's the one thing you could do about cash flow is if you don't have a plan, even if it's written out on a Post-it note, you need to do that first.
And you have to project your cash flow to, if you're Amazon, you have to project your cash flow beyond 2 months past the end of the current month, You have to have enough to get through those 2 months, and you have to lean forward the next month, because you've got to keep. So if you're going to finish a book, you have to set aside enough money for the cover, for the editing, or if you're bootstrapping, the time then to share and get that reviewed by other people, even at no cost. You just have to give them more time to get it as good as you can get it, to get it to market. Or you have to learn graphics. Barry Hutchison, he spent years perfecting how to do his covers, and his first one was tongue-in-cheek, but he did the covers well and owned that market and didn't spend more than he took in. It's very important, because he understood, this is what I need before I can start investing in ads. And he didn't spend any money he didn't have. He spent zero until he actually started drawing revenue from Amazon, and then he plowed that back into the business and expanded, cut off a certain part. Cash is king. Shepherd your cash. Understand what your outflows are going to be over the next few months. And this is what you need to look at. Like Joe said, you can write 10 books a year, but can you pay for 10 books a year? Last year, I published a book a week. I published 30 books in 30 weeks. And some of those were work for hire, where I paid by word. All of them needed covers. All of them needed editing. My expenses last year were immense for those first 30 weeks. And 2 of those series never resonated. One of them sold hundreds of copies is all. And that was horrendous, because I had this outlay and I had no income. I cut all of that. Not go into defensive mode. It's like, this isn't working. This business strategy. Now, the good news is I had enough cash, because the previous year was a good year. The business strategy was drawback. I write the books. I'll publish, instead of a book a week, I'm going to publish a book every 6 weeks, but it's going to be mine. And all of a sudden, hey, the second half of the year, supreme in regards to available cash, as well as profit over expenses, or revenue over expenses, to deliver that profit that made life reasonable and allowed me to get into this year and now increase my ad spend, because I have the backlist. And actually, I'm writing more. I'm probably going to publish 10 books this year, and I'm going to be good this year too. And those 10 books, a couple of them, or 3 of them so far, are co-authored. All the rest are mine. And that's the epitome of your profit, is what you do yourself. So you're not sharing with anybody else. Now I'm paying for covers, I'm paying for editing, and I'm paying for formatting too. I don't do that either. I'd make it look, I can't make it look pretty, so I have a guy that makes it look pretty, and and then we go to market.
Yeah, and I think that with the whole bootstrapping concept and cash flow, it's again, there's part of that equation is your expectations. It's like, if you are going to do subpar covers and have your fans do your editing and some of that stuff, I'm not saying you can't do that. Just set your expectations. Don't expect that you're going to have a #1 bestseller, or that you're not going to see that reflected in your reviews. But if you understand that, and you're like, okay, but I did sell books, right? There's another part of it too, is like, if you haven't written and you get it out there and you get responses like, hey, I really like the story, the guy needs a better editor, that's actually a good thing. Don't take it the wrong way. Like, you've proven, you've done the market research, and people are prepared to give you money for your book. Could you deliver them a better product? Yes, you can deliver a better product.
And this is the right market. If you got somebody, I like the story, but the editing or the cover, I almost didn't pick it up because the cover turned me on. Hey, great feedback, but they like the story. This is the artist you is a win. Everything else is put on your business ad. Oh shit, I can fix that. That's all stuff that's fixable. But if you're getting bad reviews because this story sucked, what do you do with that? I mean, you crush your expectations. You stop writing. No, you've got to then find where it is you're telling a good story to the right market, and then everything else can be fixed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so the second year I was at 20 books. That was the year I decided to set up like 30 something meetings in 2 days with people.
yeah.
Not one of my brightest.
You lived out at the pool.
Yeah, it was. But there was a lot of folks that came to me that were like, hey, this is what my plan is. And my plan, and there was a common theme that came up with new writers. It's like, I got a 3-book series in a genre that is, expecting a series. and I've got enough money to do book 1, and my expectation is the money from book 1 is going to pay for book 2 and book 3. It's like plan destined to fail.
Yeah.
Destined to fail. So like, but that's good. I'd rather hear somebody say that. And that's a common misconception. It's like, why wouldn't it? Well, because think about if you're an avid reader and you drive by the bookstore and you see they've got the first book there, and you know that you could read that first book in 3 hours. And it's compelling and you want to read it, but you want to read all 3 books. You're going to come back when all 3 books are there. So now that just becomes you resetting the framework of your business. It's like, okay, this is going to take longer than I thought. I have to save up some more money. And the funny thing is you'll probably end up writing a better book because you've reframed the time you have to write those books, and you have to understand that you're writing all 3 and how they fit together. But it comes out of the whole idea of thinking about this as a business and thinking about, I don't need 1 cover. I need 3 covers. Yeah. Or maybe I need 4 because I need one for my reader magnet, right? Like you start to put all the pieces in place, and then your launch is just that much more successful. Just because you got an idea and a book cover does not mean that you're in the book business.
Yeah, you can publish a book, but just temper the expectations of what needs to be done. One takes off. Emily Mandeville, St. John Mandeville. She published Station 11, 1 book, and it did really well. Went viral. I read it. It was a really, really well crafted book with some great irony. And 6 years later, she published her second book. It's like, holy crap, 6 years between books. I know the first one went viral, but there's no way she made 6 years worth of annual income off that 1 book. But she took her time, and that's I compliment her on getting that second book out. Now, it was completely different, and the readers were expecting something more of like her first style, which she changed her style, and so they didn't come on board. That second book did not go viral. So, okay, if she did make 6 years worth of annual income off that first book, and the second book didn't, what does that do for her ego or creativity moving forward? Mm-hmm. Is she done as an author? Can she continue writing a book every 6 years and be realizing the success she realized with that first book? And my answer is no. And this is one of the things that I say: if you're too successful with the first book, you may lose that edge of desiring. People ask me, well, what would you do differently on your first book? Not a damn thing, because I learned some great lessons. That book isn't as good as it could be. I'm not going to go back and rewrite it. It's with TradPub. They, bought and paid for. So I learned great lessons, and I stayed hungry. Each book needs to be better than the last. And if you're wildly successful on the first book, how do you get input to help you get better? And this is the challenge. It's what continuous improvement. If you start off at 99%, what's your motivation to get to 100? Do you have to drop down to 80% successful to then realize, geez, I need to do something differently? And this is you can look at people's egos. I don't think Emily is ego driven or anything like that. I don't think that's the issue. But some people, they publish, they're successful. Hey, their shit doesn't stink. And guess what? It does. It's just this one book for some reason took off, and then book 2, 3. I know a lot of authors who had that successful first book who have tanked after that and are no longer writing because it was too much of a blow. So getting that improving book to book is so critical to your psyche. If you're me, it was so important because I've always been successful in my career. I graduated first in high school. I was summa cum laude from law school, summa cum laude from University of Arizona. All of that, never had any problems, did well, got promoted to major 2 years below the zone. But writing that first book, I sold 53 copies over 3 months. So it's like, oh no. And then I get like the recent book 4 years old, get 1-star reviews. It torques me a little bit, but it's a learning point. Okay. Hey, it's different that the books are better now. And I want somebody starting that because if they like the story, they can jump into another one and say, holy cow, this is better. And this is better. And this is, and continue and follow me, because every new reader is new that can go all the way back to the beginning. And especially if they read one of the current books and then go back to the beginning and say, oh yeah, I see where you've improved as an author. I still like the story, but this isn't anywhere near as good as that's right. 4 million words later, I'm learning how to write. So it's you learn if you have the mindset to learn. If you think that your stuff is perfect, you're wrong, because perfect is relative. Like I'm starting a thriller series this fall. I have a lot of money set aside to launch it well. I've got Stuart Batch covers. I've got one of the best developmental editors in the business who's going to look at it. This is all going to cost a lot of money. I've written over 100 books. Developmental editor? I know how to write a story. I want this one to be great. And so it's like, hey, I think I've hit a plateau with my writing, and here's an opportunity to improve, jumping into an old genre, but new for me with this thriller series. So all of that, and this is, once again, it goes to cash. I've got the cash, and I'm really counting on a home run from this series, and I really hope it does. And I'm going to give it every opportunity within my control. It's not like I'm going to throw it out there, and if it doesn't go viral, I'm going to curl up into a shell. No, I will know that I have given it my best effort, and I need to keep working. So that's final word. We've been an hour and a half. This is the longest C&M show ever. And here we got Joe Solari. We talked a little bit about cash flow during our cash flow discussion, but I think we touched on a lot of good points. Final words, Joe.
Yeah, I think that given what's going on in the world today, if this is the business that you want to be in, you need to treat it that way, right? You need to, and here's the thing is, if you're like, you start getting hives when you think about business and numbers, and that's okay. Most people are that way. 99% of the people that start a small business don't do it because they're interested in doing taxes or working on spreadsheets. It's because they're either really good at what they do, or they love what they do, and they do it, and they become, either they're compelled, they can't help themselves, which is the case with a lot of writers. It's like, really, this is hard work. Like, it's not going to get rich quick scheme. It's the exact opposite. It's how to fuck up your back in a chair 12 hours a day work, right? If you are compelled to do that, this is an area where you can make great leaps, right? You mentioned talking about a developmental editor. It's kind of like how I think of myself as like a strength coach for business, for authors, right? This is an area where we can get you to do things better, and the impact of these tools on any business are monumental, right? Again, like, the data does not change. Most businesses don't last 5 years. And the number one reason why a business goes out of business is it runs out of cash. So if you just address that one issue of cash, making sure you have the cash to get to break even, and you're realistic about what break even is, that it's not this first book. It might even not be the first 5 books. It might be the first 3 years, like most businesses. If you get the money you get for those 3 years, or level set your life to what it means to do this for those 3 years, eating ramen noodles, then you'll be successful.
I was asked to be a partner in an international tax law firm when I was still doing the lawyer thing. And I think the data on why businesses fail is skewed. You can deduct your expenses for a business for the first, out of 5 years, you need to show 2 years profit. If you haven't showed that profit, you can't deduct them. So most businesses who are unsuccessful will fold at the 4-year point. And I think that skews the numbers and makes it look like, 4 years is the magic. Yeah, 4 years is magic, because if you don't, you hit 5, you're going to retroactively owe a lot of taxes on shit you deducted. So that is why that's the red letter time frame and timing on small businesses, especially.
Yeah, there's a quote Pablo Picasso said, and I don't have it exactly right, but it's to have the courage of earning a living from your vocation, right? So when you look at his career, this is a dude that made a shitload of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money, and lived a really good life. But when you look back in his career, he was very poor in the beginning, because he made a commitment to his vocation of what he wanted to do. He didn't want to be a starving artist. He wanted to be a rich ass artist with lots of famous friends and kids with every woman he ever met. That's what he really wanted to do. And he could afford that. But what he did is he understood in the beginning part of his career, he had to live like that starving artist, right? It was on his own. He was focused on, but he was absolutely focused on his career. And
with a business, he understood that it had to have a business component. Otherwise, he was going to be like Van Gogh. During his lifetime, he sold 2 paintings. That's it, 2. And they were to a family member who felt sorry for him.
Yeah.
He sold his whole career, and those paintings go for tens of millions now.
Yeah. I mean, if, you know, I can't remember what the last was, over $100 million, his last painting when it went to auction, you know, so those, when the starving artist thing is a super big crock, but what isn't a crock is understanding that any startup business, especially one built around your creativity, requires you to make these sacrifices. And the cool thing is when it is based on your creativity, although it may not feel like it as an author because you hit those dry spots, you really do have an unlimited resource, right? It's not like you and I go buy an oil well, and once that reserve is depleted, that's it. It's not worth anything anymore. It's your creativity. It's like, you know, you could be in the shower and come up with the next best-selling idea.
It's a bottomless well. And with that, at an hour and 26 fucking minutes, the show, we're gonna wrap the show tomorrow. Michael will be returned. Craig and Michael chatting about whatever we wide open, not our butts, as Michael makes me promise every time. We're not going to talk about our butts. Okay, even though that's where Joe started the show an hour and a half ago about
our monkey balls.
You have a PhD in it, so exploit that. Work to your strength, Joe. Work to your strength. Ask jokes. All right, everybody have a great day, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Bye.